Well, I'm an idiot. I had the fucking mute button pushed. Can you even believe this? That was why there was no sound. The mute button was pushed. That kind of sums up my week. Holy cow. Sorry about that. All right. Let's get going. Anyway, what I was saying was shitty week. Really, really shitty week. Pretty dejected. Feeling like nothing's going right this year. You know, of all my big names, Yext, huge losses, RVMD, medium to big losses. And now Forward is, back to flat on the year with every trucking stock up huge year to date. So I'm down, I don't know, 13% year to date, which seems incredible given how much has gone wrong, right? I haven't had an event work this year. So I'm hanging in there and I'm still optimistic about a lot of my stuff, but it's trying. It's been very trying for me. I mean, I was up 20% at one point in the first few weeks of January. But look, I have a very volatile portfolio, as we all know. So let's talk about some new names. I do want to, before I talk about the old names, I will say that I've been spending some time on software and on small cap software. And it reminds me a little bit of what happened in biotech as a sector. So big picture, when a whole sector goes to zero, the ones that get hit the worst are, I didn't say no. Now someone says no audio. Your picks make always, oh, he just must be delayed. That's hilarious. Two people say that they can't hear me. You guys can hear me, right? Yeah, I see there's sound on here. Killing me here. Is it loud enough? I can make it a little louder. Okay. When the whole sector goes to zero, the ones that get hit the worst are always the small caps and the micro caps. And, you can just argue that you're just basically buying more risk, more beta. But man, there are some small cap software companies trading at, 1x sales, 1x gross profit, significant free cash flow margins, though a ton of stock-based comp, clean balance sheets, pretty much no net debt or net cash, and billings and revenue are growing at, low single digits kind of thing. And the stocks are down, I don't know, 60, 70% since September. And to me, they seem pretty ripe for consolidation, for activism. The problem you have is that PE isn't going to be the buyer right now because he can't get any credit. And they're also, I think, kind of like deer in headlights with their current existing portfolios. So what you need is consolidation amongst each other. You need strategic to buy them for the most part, or you need to wait it out. And the valuations now are so compelling at some of the really smaller names. I'm not going to give names right now, but that I've started buying them. And I'll probably have a basket approach for the most part. There's one I like in particular, but again, I'm not really ready to talk about it yet. And so that's what I've been focusing on, at least this week. My core positions all remain the same. I have not sold Forward. To talk about Forward is it's very frustrating to me. The trucking stocks have done well the last few days, and Forward's been the worst performer. So what do I think is going to happen with Forward? I think the odds of a sale are low. I do. I think they're low. I think the odds of something strategic happening are high. I think they would have killed the process at earnings if it was dead, given it's been 13 months. I have a hard time squaring what could happen here that wouldn't be a sale, that would matter at all to the company, right? The only thing they could sell, like I said, is intermodal. And I think that might not even be a delevering event if they sell it for, less than 9 times EBITDA. So I don't know what they're planning on doing. I'm frustrated by the fact that I think that it would make a good LBO. Even with private credit right now, I would think they could probably get the deal done since it's not in software, right? It's a trucking company, uh, and there's already a ton of debt on it. So you're not going to put new leverage on it. You'd have to refinance that debt, of course. And I'm holding out. It's a huge position. I have tons of March calls, mostly all 2250s and some 25s, short 30s against it. So my delta adjusted is abnormally high. It's like 75% delta adjusted position. But of that, half of it is the options. Common is like a 30% position. And we'll see what happens. I have a call next week with IR because I have some questions about the quarter. I've never spoken to IR before. I'll report back what I hear. I would expect this to be over in the relatively near term, in the next few weeks. Again, I don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to end, but I don't see it going past it's definitely won't go past the end of March, I don't think. But I think it'll happen in the next 2 weeks. So I wish I could be more optimistic there. But again, I'm not selling. I would trim it at higher levels since I'm so big. But at 25, I'm content in waiting to see what happens with the strategic process. TripAdvisor, nothing's changed there. I mean, these things are all trading on AI stuff, right? They're not even trading on fundamentals anymore. So TripAdvisor, in a lot of ways, is just a bet, that software, and it's not even a software stock, but I mean, the fork is. But that software and Viator, I guess, isn't in some ways. You're betting on a more of a macro thing there because you're not going to sell the fork anytime soon. Though with TripAdvisor is interesting, you could get an article that leaks that says somebody's trying to buy the whole company or that they've attracted suitors or whatever. That could happen, I think, at any time, given the fact that they are going to be fighting an activist. So again, still very, very constructive and positive in TripAdvisor. Just I'm cognizant of the fact that it's just moving with the rest of the market, with the rest of those kinds of stocks. There was some news on my other big position, which is SEM, which is that the founder refined their bid from 16 to 1620 to exactly 16 and said due diligence is over. I have not sold any of this. It's a big position. It's a 30% position. That one's weird because I can go a lot of different ways why he did that. You don't have to do that publicly. They could have negotiated privately without him amending his 13D. I still think there's an overwhelming chance that gets sold. I have a hard time doing the odds on whether it gets sold at 16 or gets sold with a little bump. The fact that he came out with that $16 bid makes me think that he's trying to force the special committee to, sell at 16. That's a very small premium. I don't know how to handicap 16 versus 1650, or maybe somebody else coming in, though I would say the odds of a third party are low here, given how much control the executive chairman has on the company. But look, I continue to like it a lot because for me, it's a defensive stock, right? It's not down today. So it fits well with my portfolio since I have just a ton of shitcos. This one's not a shitco. So that's the reason, my rationale behind owning it. What else we got here? Nothing's changed with ABVX, PRTA, BBIO, RVMD. An interesting tidbit there. They reported earnings and they initiated an ATM for $1 billion. And I thought that was really bullish. Now, I usually don't hear ATM and bullish, but the reason why that was bullish to me is this is the first time since all the M&A talk from a few months ago that they could have done a raise if they wanted to. They're burning a lot of money. And they have this big data readout coming soon in the first half of the year. And they didn't do a secondary. Instead, they did this ATM, which gives them maximum flexibility to raise money after good data, but only as much as they need to raise, as opposed to a large, big secondary. And then also they don't have to do anything, right? If they have great data and they are still planning on, shopping the company after that data, they have the ATM there in their back pocket. And I've always been a fan of ATMs versus secondaries. I know that sounds crazy, but the reason why is you're selling stock at the market, not at a deep discount, and nobody is getting unfairly hurt by pricing a big slug of stock at a discount that you can't participate in as an owner. So I think more companies should do ATMs, but that's not the reason why I think it was bullish. I think it's bullish because most don't. Most go through traditional secondaries, and they didn't do it, right? They did this ATM. So, I still really like our VMD. I'm obviously a bag holder there, and I'm massive thesis drift, but I still have a pretty big position there. My common is 8%. And then I have the June and September call spreads I've talked about in the past. So I don't think anybody's bought those, but I have those on as well as a little add-on. Dawn was down pretty significantly on earnings. I think the reason why that was that prescriptions RXs were only up a similar amount in Q4 versus Q3, were up versus Q2. And I think when people saw that big revenue number, they thought it was going to be a much bigger actual RX number. And since the RX number was more muted, I think people sold it off. It's completely irrelevant to me. I think that story works over the next year or two. And I think it's a really cheap stock. I still own LEG, which is, I think I've talked about it here before, which is in talks right now to be acquired by SGI. I think it's highly likely that those talks end in a deal, though I'm not sure there's a huge amount of upside left here, regardless, figuring out what the ratio is going to be and so forth and what price they pay. CYTK, everything's good there. EX is a much smaller position now. It's like 5%, and I'm going to tender it all. I have no good feel about earnings. I think the only reason why EX has hung in there is because of that tender offer. The stock would be like $4, I think, if there wasn't a tender offer. I think that covers all of my stocks. Let's talk a little bit about other stuff. So someone asked about Cure. The Cure situation is absolutely fascinating, of course. For those of you that don't know, little background, Cure was on path to file an NDA for their Huntington's drug last year. And then the FDA reversed their decision, saying that they don't have the data to file. They announced in early January, the FDA granted them a type A or type B meeting. And they also said they would not update the market until after meeting minutes come from that meeting. Mind you, last time when they updated the market, it was before meeting minutes when they were told that they can't file. So we're now sitting here at February 27th. I assume the meeting happened sometime in January. We don't know if it's, the middle of January, the end of January. So we don't know if they have their meeting minutes yet, right? Their earnings are on Monday. So I don't know why they would have published an earnings day without the minutes. They could have waited a week or two to do earnings. They have until March 15th. And I also think pretty strongly that if they had the minutes and the minutes were positive, they would issue a press release immediately to tell us that it was positive. So what's the real news this week? The real news this week is that the FDA commissioner was on CNBC, and he said something about an unnamed drug, drilling holes in your head and failing the randomized control part of the trial. And even though there's no drugs out there, there's no treatments out there for this disease, they're not going to approve it. So people tried to make that think that they thought that was not Cure, that was RGNX. To me, it's quite clearly it was Cure. Some of the nitpicking I've seen on Twitter about that Cure's drug wasn't up for approval, so it couldn't be Cure, seems really far-fetched to me. Cure did fail the randomized control part of their study. RGNX, I don't believe, did. Cure does a burr hole in the head. It's my understanding RGNX doesn't do that now, or there was some confusion about that element of it, but for the most part, that's cure. And then there's other drugs on the market, another drug on the market for the disease that RGNX was targeting, and there's no approved drugs for Huntington's. Let's be clear, the market's not pricing in much odds in cure having a reversal. So you could buy April 30, 40 call spreads for under $1. And for the stock to go above 40, you would need a complete reversal where they can file on the current data, or the FDA saying they could file this year with some other data, right? That would be what you need to get the stock above 40. The problem with cure is that I'm not sure there is a happy medium for this company and for the FDA, right? Either they want a randomized controlled study or they don't. And, a randomized controlled study here would take years. The other thing that taints me with cure, most of you probably don't know this, but some of you do, is that I used to own a lot of cure a few years ago when the stock was $4 or $5. And I spoke to management semi-regularly, I guess, and even did a phone call with the chairman. And I don't consider them trustworthy based on what was said and based on what was promised on those calls. So if I don't trust them, it's hard for me to get involved in any way whatsoever. I'll leave it at that. So I just don't think the FDA is going to reverse their decision. I didn't think so a month ago, 2 months ago, and I certainly don't think so after what the FDA chairman just said on TV. Could they reverse the decision? Yes, Huntington's is a terrible disease, but it was a terrible disease 2 months ago, 3 months ago when the FDA reversed the decision. So I know we're getting used to FDA flip-flopping and everything, but I think that this one is not one that's going to be flip-flopped. Again, the market's only pricing in like a 10 or 15% chance of them flip-flopping. So is it worth a punt? It's not for me, but the other thing I would say is, again, if they had the meeting minutes and then the stock blew up yesterday or 2 days ago by the FDA chairman saying all that stuff, of course they're going to come out and tell us that it wasn't about cure and that they could file this year. I'm not convinced they have the meeting minutes yet. I think if they had the meeting minutes, they would have had to do a press release immediately. They couldn't wait until earnings on Monday. So that would be your bullish case, is that they are just sitting on their hands waiting for the news, formally, and they're going to shout it out either on Monday or shortly after that the FDA has somehow reversed. I would love to hear what you think reversing could be, by the way. The part that I think that people should really focus on here is that when you don't have a randomized controlled trial and you're using an external control, you're just completely taking the company at its word that it was done kind of in an arm's length, objective way and not force feeding the data to make it show that your drug works. Now, I realize that this has now been showing a lot of stability on the drug arm for the last few years, and I'm not at all claiming that the drug doesn't work, but the FDA knows way more than we do about what that control arm is, and they've done their own analysis on what they think the right control arm should be from an externally controlled perspective, not a randomized controlled trial. And my guess is the FDA did not like what Cure is using for an external control. And that is the crux of why they reversed. There's no upside in the FDA not approving drugs for rare diseases that kill people. Huntington's disease is like one of the worst diseases. So, they want to prove this stuff and they want to scream it from the mountains that they've approved it. Regardless what you think about Vinod, or the hell his name is, and look, I'll be honest, over the last few years, I've changed my views dramatically on what I think about the drug industry and these rare diseases and these approvals. I've said it I've said it ad nauseum on Twitter, and I've said it probably on here too. I'm all for right to try. I'm all for drugs being available legally to anybody that wants to try them. It's when we as a society have to pay millions of dollars per person for a drug that has not been clinically proven, and might only offer modest benefits. I think that's where the whole thing falls off the rails. And Sarepta really is the poster child for this. Um, Sarepta, going back a decade, has not shown any of their drugs have had real material efficacy. Um, yes, there's been tons of anecdotal stories, and I'm happy the kids have the drugs, as any person with a heart, would want. But I'm not happy that it's cost society billions of dollars, that has subsidized their R&D and made management very rich over the last 10 years, while, again, it's unknown whether or not these drugs either work or work in a very materially positive way. And, that's a shame, right? It's going to bankrupt the healthcare system. So, I mean, I think that's really what his issues are with these approvals, not that he wants kids not to have the right to try, or adults not to have the right to try. The same thing goes for rare cancer, drugs. Everybody should be able to have the right to try them. It's just whether or not society should have to pay $1 billion a pop for something that, either doesn't show conclusive evidence that it works, or maybe it's just a 1 or 2 month added benefit. I guess I'm pro death panel. Right? I think that we need to make hard decisions about what we pay for as a healthcare industry, because the whole system's going to go bankrupt. I'm on one of the public plans, and we're all just a pooled, group of people, and we're all paying for it, and that's it's not free. There's no free lunch here. It's all coming out of our pockets. And I would say this even if my own kid needed one of these drugs. I would hope I'd have access to it, and I would hope that it was free. But my thoughts behind it wouldn't change intellectually. So anyway, that's a long way of saying I think if the drug definitely showed efficacy and they knew it from the external controls, they wouldn't be giving Cure a hard time at all. And they're giving Cure a pretty hard time. So if they reverse it, great. I'm happy for my fellow ex-Cure shareholders and everybody else on Twitter, but I'm pretty skeptical that they'll reverse it. Okay. Anything else, guys? I think that's everything, right? I don't know. I hope I can come on here with some good news with something one of these days. But yeah, it's been a tough slug. All right, let's keep it short. Have a great weekend, everybody.